You think high school bullies are tough until they cross the wrong family bloodline. When a battered 15-year-old dragged his badly bruised leg across the football field for the 5th day in a row, his coach made a desperate phone call that brought a fully patched Hell's Angel roaring onto the campus. The late October sun was beating down relentlessly on the artificial turf of Oak Creek High. Coach Brian Matthews stood at the 50-yard line, his whistle hanging heavy around his neck. For 12 years, Brian had run this football program. He knew the difference between a kid who pulled a hamstring and a kid who was trying to hide a tragedy. And 15-year-old Cody Sullivan was hiding a massive one. Cody was a scrawny freshman, barely pushing 130 pounds soaking wet. He didn't have the natural build for football, but he had heart. He showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. But all week, Cody had been limping. It didn't start as a bad limp, just a slight hesitation on his right side on Monday. By Wednesday, he was dragging his foot. Now, on Friday afternoon, every step looked like a miserable, agonizing negotiation with gravity. "Sullivan," Brian barked, watching the kid wince as he tried to run a simple slant route. "Get over here now." Cody hobbled over, his helmet pulled down low to obscure his eyes. He was panting, his face pale beneath the smudges of eye black and sweat. "What's going on with the leg, son?" Brian asked, keeping his voice low so the rest of the defensive line wouldn't hear. "Nothing, coach," Cody mumbled to the turf. "Just tweaked it on the stairs at home. I'm good to play." "You look like you're walking on broken glass, Cody. I'm benching you for the scrimmage. Go see the trainer." Panic flashed across Cody's eyes, a sharp, feral kind of terror that made Brian's stomach drop. "No, please, coach. I can't go to the trainer. I'm fine. Just tape it up. Please." Brian narrowed his eyes. He glanced over Cody's shoulder. About 20 yards away, standing near the water coolers, were Trent Harris and Weston Cole. They were junior varsity starters and the undisputed kings of Oak Creek's toxic social hierarchy. Trent was the son of a prominent local real estate developer who essentially funded the athletic department's new weight room. Weston was his hulking right-hand man. Both of them were currently staring directly at Cody, nudging each other and snickering. When Cody saw where the coach was looking, he visibly flinched. He shrank into his shoulder pads, trying to make himself as small as possible. "Hit the showers, Cody." "That's an order," Brian said softly, but leaving no room for argument. "We're done for the day." 30 minutes later, the locker room had mostly cleared out. Brian walked out of his office to do a final sweep and heard a sharp intake of breath coming from the far corner. He walked down the rows of dented metal lockers and stopped dead in his tracks. Cody was sitting on a wooden bench, struggling to pull his sweatpants over his right leg. His shorts were pushed up, revealing his thigh and rib cage. Brian felt a cold fury spike in his chest. Cody wasn't injured from football. His upper thigh was painted in horrific shades of deep purple, black, and sickly yellow. But it wasn't just a bruise. Right in the center of the largest contusion was a perfectly defined crescent shape, the unmistakable, heavily treaded imprint of a steel-toed boot. Furthermore, his ribs were mottled with smaller, clustered bruises that looked like the result of repeated, targeted blows. "Good God, Cody," Brian breathed, stepping forward. Cody scrambled desperately, trying to pull his clothes down, tears of humiliation and pain welling in his eyes. "Coach, it's not what it looks like. I fell." "You didn't fall on a steel-toed boot," Brian interrupted, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Who did this to you? Was it Trent? Was it Weston?" Cody shook his head, violently sobbing now. "You can't do anything, coach. You can't. If you say something, they'll kill me. They told me they would. They locked me in the boiler room after 7th period. They take my lunch money, and when I ran out of money, they started charging me interest and hits." Brian felt sick. Extortion, physical assault, right under his nose in the halls of Oak Creek High. He put a hand on Cody's shaking shoulder. "I'm going to Principal Wallace right now. We're calling the police." "No." Cody grabbed Brian's forearm with surprising strength. "Wallace won't do anything. Trent's dad pays for everything. They went to Wallace last year when Trent broke a kid's nose, and Wallace swept it under the rug. If you go to the cops, Trent's dad will have it buried, and then Trent will come after me worse." Brian knew the kid wasn't entirely wrong. Oak Creek High was nestled in a wealthy suburb, and scandals were frequently smothered with checkbooks and quiet transfers. But Brian couldn't just let this go. "Cody," I have to call your parents then. We need an adult in your corner. Cody let out a hollow, bitter laugh. My mom took off when I was 6. My dad is doing 3 to 5 in a state penitentiary for grand theft auto. I live in a foster placement across the county lines, and my foster mom has 5 other kids to worry about. She doesn't care. There's nobody, coach. I just have to take it until I graduate. Brian stared at the bruised, broken 15-year-old. The system had utterly failed this boy. The school was corrupt, his home life was fractured, and the authorities were a gamble that Cody was too terrified to take. Get dressed, Brian said quietly. Wait in my office. Brian stormed down the hall to the administrative wing, pushing his way into the filing room. The school secretary gave him a startled look, but Brian ignored her, pulling open the heavy metal drawers for the freshman class. He flipped through the folders until he found Sullivan, Cody. He scanned the emergency contact sheet. Mother, not applicable. Father, not applicable. Guardian, Brenda Higgins, foster. Brian noted the 3 missed call logs next to her name from previous minor incidents. She clearly never answered. But down at the very bottom, scrolled in black ink under alternative emergency contact, was a single name and a phone number. Brother, Jackson Sullivan. Brian didn't know Cody had an older brother. He pulled out his cell phone, his thumb hovering over the keypad. If the school wouldn't protect this kid and the foster system was blind, maybe blood would step up. Brian shut his office door, leaving Cody huddled on the small leather sofa outside, and dialed the number. The phone rang 4 times. Brian was about to hang up, assuming it was a dead end, when the line clicked open. There was no hello. Instead, Brian was hit with a wall of chaotic noise, the heavy rhythmic thumping of classic rock, the clinking of heavy glassware, the raucous shouting of deep, gravelly voices, and the distinct, thunderous idle of a motorcycle engine revving in the background. Yeah, who's this? A voice growled. It sounded like it was dragged across asphalt. Is this Jackson Sullivan? Brian asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Depends on who's asking. People usually call me Brick. Make it quick, man. I'm busy. Brick, my name is Brian Matthews. I'm the head football coach at Oak Creek High School. I'm calling about your younger brother, Cody. The background noise on the other end of the line seemed to suddenly muffle, as if Jackson had stepped out of the bar and into an alley. The tone shifted instantly from annoyed to deadly serious. Is he okay? He in the hospital? No, he's in my office, but he's not okay, Brian said, lowering his voice. He's been severely beaten. He's been limping all week. I finally got a look at him. Someone has been taking a steel-toed boot to your brother's ribs and thighs. It looks like systematic abuse. Silence hung on the line for a heavy, terrifying 5 seconds. Who? Jackson asked. Just one word. Cold as ice. 2 older boys, Trent Harris and Weston Cole. They're extorting him, beating him when he can't pay. Cody is terrified. He wouldn't even let me go to the principal because Trent's family practically owns the school administration. Cody told me he had nobody to stand up for him. He told you he had nobody? Jackson repeated, the gravel in his voice thickening with a dark, terrifying emotion. I put him in that rich kid district so he wouldn't have to deal with the street trash in my neighborhood. I told him to keep his head down and get good grades. I didn't know. Well, now you do, Brian said. I can't put him back out in those hallways, Jackson. The school will sweep it under the rug, and the police will get tangled in red tape from the Harris family lawyers. I'm out of options here, and your brother needs help. Keep him in your office, Jackson commanded. Don't let him out of your sight. I'm 30 miles out. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Wait, Jackson. You can't just come up here and start a brawl. Coach, Jackson interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Thank you for making the call, but from this second on, Oak Creek High is out of its jurisdiction. The line went dead. Brian stared at his phone, a sudden knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. He had just set something into motion, and he had no idea what it was. 25 minutes later, the afternoon bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Students poured out of the brick buildings, flooding the parking lot and the grassy areas around the athletic fields. Trent Harris and Weston Cole were leaning against Trent's brand new lifted pickup truck, laughing loudly and tossing a football back and forth, surrounded by a group of cheerleaders. They looked like the kings of the world, untouchable and arrogant. Brian was standing at the edge of the parking lot with Cody, intending to walk him directly to his foster mother's car, when the ground began to vibrate. It started as a low, guttural rumble in the distance, echoing off the suburban houses. Within seconds, the sound amplified into a deafening roar. Heads turned all across the parking lot. Conversation stopped. Rounding the corner onto the main school drive came a custom flat black Harley-Davidson Road Glide. It didn't belong in this manicured, wealthy suburb. The bike looked like a weapon, stripped down and menacing. The rider pulled the clutch and let the engine roar, a sound that cracked like thunder across the quiet campus. He rode straight past the visitor parking, hopped the curb without slowing down, and drove the heavy machine directly onto the concrete courtyard in front of the main entrance, stopping directly between Trent's truck and the football field. He kicked the stand down and killed the engine. The sudden silence that fell over the courtyard was deafening. Every student, teacher, and parent was staring. The man stepped off the bike. He was massive, easily 6 feet 4 inches, built like a brick wall with heavy tattooed arms corded with muscle. He wore thick black boots, faded grease-stained jeans, and a heavy leather vest over a black t-shirt. But it was the back of the vest that made Brian's blood run cold and caused several parents in the parking lot to visibly gasp and pull their children back. Emblazoned across the leather in stark, undeniable red and white rockers was the legendary winged Death's Head. Top rocker, Hell's Angels. Bottom rocker, Nomad. Jackson, Brick, Sullivan took off his matte black helmet, revealing a scarred face, a thick dark beard, and eyes that looked like they had seen the bottom of hell. He hung the helmet on his handlebars, reached into his saddlebag, and pulled out a heavy metal chain wallet, hooking it to his belt. He didn't look at the screaming administration officials. He didn't look at the security guard who was frozen in terror near the front doors. Jackson's eyes scanned the crowd, panning slowly over the hundreds of terrified teenagers, until his gaze locked onto Coach Brian Matthews, and then onto the small, trembling frame of Cody standing behind him. The hardened biker's face broke for just a fraction of a second when he saw the heavy, unnatural angle of his little brother's leg. Then the mask of absolute, calculated violence slipped back into place. Jackson began to walk across the pavement. The crowd of students parted in front of him like the Red Sea, backing away in pure panic. Nobody breathed. The clacking of his heavy boots echoed off the brick walls of the school. He stopped 5 feet in front of Brian. He looked down at Cody. "Hey, kid," Jackson said, his voice surprisingly gentle, completely at odds with his terrifying appearance. "Jax," Cody whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and sheer panic. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to wear your cut here. Rules changed today, little brother," Jackson said. He slowly turned his head, his eyes sweeping back over the crowd until they landed squarely on the lifted pickup truck. Trent Harris and Weston Cole were still standing there. The arrogant smirks had completely vanished from their faces. Weston looked like he was going to vomit. Trent's face was the color of chalk, his hands trembling slightly where he held the football. They had spent the whole year terrorizing kids, knowing their parents' money made them invincible. But money meant absolutely nothing to the man currently glaring at them. They had awoken a completely different kind of monster. Jackson looked back at Cody, pointing a massive calloused finger toward the truck. "Now," Jackson rumbled loud enough for the entire courtyard to hear. "Which one is Trent, and which one is Weston?" Cody swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. He raised a trembling hand, pointing past the sea of shocked students toward the lifted pickup truck. "The blonde one holding the ball is Trent," Cody whispered, his voice cracking. "The big guy next to him is Weston." Jackson didn't nod. He simply adjusted the heavy rings on his right hand and began to walk. As he closed the distance, the reality of the situation seemed to finally pierce Trent and Weston's arrogant bubble. The cheerleaders who had been flocking around them instantly scattered, fleeing toward the safety of the school doors. Weston took a step backward, bumping hard into the side of the truck, his eyes wide and panicked. "Hey, stop right there." The shrill, panicked voice belonged to Principal Gregory Wallace. The balding, perpetually red-faced administrator came bustling out of the front doors, a walkie-talkie clutched in his sweaty grip. He scurried in front of Jackson, puffing his chest out in a desperate attempt to assert his authority. "You are trespassing on school property, sir," Principal Wallace barked, though his voice wavered under Jackson's shadow. "I demand you leave immediately, or I am calling the police." Jackson stopped. He looked down at the principal, a slow, dark amusement playing in his eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, grating register that only Wallace and the immediate bystanders could hear. "You call whoever you want, Greg," Jackson rumbled. "But before they get here, I'm going to have a conversation with the boys who have been using my little brother for target practice while you turned a blind eye. Now, step aside, or I'll move you myself." Wallace turned pale. He looked from Jackson's scarred face to the terrifying winged death's head on the leather cut. His self-preservation instinct kicked in, and the principal silently stepped backward, essentially abandoning his students to the wolf. Jackson resumed his slow, deliberate march until he was standing chest to chest with Trent Harris. Trent was tall for a high school junior, but next to the Hell's Angel, he looked exactly like what he was, a frightened little boy playing dress-up. "You're Trent," Jackson stated. It wasn't a question. Trent tried to muster the sneer that had ruled the hallways of Oak Creek High. "Yeah, who are you? You can't just come on campus and threaten me. Do you have any idea who my dad is?" A terrifying grin spread across Jackson's face. "William Harris owns Harris Development Group, currently trying to push through a $70 million commercial high-rise down by the riverside. Drives a silver Mercedes S-Class. Am I missing anything?" Trent blinked, the last remnants of his bravado evaporating. How? How do you know that?" "Because your daddy's high-rise needs concrete, steel, and freight," Jackson said smoothly, pulling a sleek black smartphone from his pocket. "And out in the real world, little boy, your daddy's money doesn't move a single truck without my club's permission. We control the freight union. We run the supply chain." Jackson unlocked his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He tapped a name, put the phone on speaker, and turned the volume all the way up. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Bill Harris speaking." Trent visibly flinched at the sound of his father's voice echoing across the silent courtyard. "Bill, it's Brick." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The arrogance instantly vanished from the wealthy developer's tone, replaced by nervous deference. "Brick, hey man, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Everything good with the cement pouring at the Riverside site." "The pour is fine, Bill," Jackson said, locking eyes with Trent. "But we have a personal problem. I'm currently standing in the parking lot of Oak Creek High. I'm looking at your son, Trent." Silence stretched over the speaker. Is there an issue with Trent?" "There is," Jackson replied, his voice dropping a lethal octave. "Your kid has been extorting my little brother, Cody, taking his money, locking him in closets. And this week Trent and his buddy took a steel-toed boot to my brother's ribs and leg. He's bleeding, Bill. Underneath his clothes, he is black and blue." "Oh my God," Bill Harris breathed. The pure panic in his voice made Trent's knees buckle. "Brick, I swear to you I didn't know. I had no idea." "I believe you," Jackson said calmly. "But here's the reality. I don't go to the cops, Bill. You know how my family handles its business. But because you and I have a lucrative arrangement, I'm giving you a choice. Either I handle Trent my way, right here, right now." Jackson paused, letting the threat hang heavy in the crisp autumn air. "Or I pull every single union driver off the Riverside site tomorrow morning. Your project halts indefinitely. You bleed millions." No, Brick. Please listen to me," Bill begged, his voice rising in desperation. "Put him on the phone. Put Trent on the phone, right now." Jackson held the phone out. Trent took it, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. Dad, I can explain." "Shut your mouth," Bill roared through the speaker, the sound cracking like a whip. "You listen to me, you stupid, arrogant little punk. Do you have any idea who you just touched? Do you know what you've done to our family?" "Dad, I'm sorry. It was just a joke." "It's not a joke," Bill screamed. "You apologize to that man. You apologize to his brother. And then you walk your entitled ass directly into Principal Wallace's office, and you confess to everything. Every single thing. Do you hear me?" Trent was openly weeping now, tears streaming down his face in front of the entire school. "Dad, they'll expel me. It'll ruin my transcripts. I don't care if you have to dig ditches for the rest of your miserable life," his father bellowed. "If you don't do exactly what Brick says, you are out of my house tonight. Do you understand me? You give him the phone back right now." Trent handed the phone back to Jackson, his spirit utterly broken. Next to him, Weston was staring at his shoes, realizing that if the most powerful kid in school just got thrown to the wolves, he stood absolutely zero chance. Jackson brought the phone back to his ear. We have an understanding, Bill. We have an understanding, Brick. He's going to the principal's office. I'm driving to the school right now to formally withdraw him. I'm so sorry. Jackson hung up the phone. He slid it back into his pocket and turned to look at Principal Wallace, who had been listening to the entire exchange in stunned silence. You heard the man, Greg, Jackson said. Trent and Weston are going to march into your office. They are going to write down a full confession of assault and extortion. Then you are going to expel them. No quiet transfers. No sweeping it under the rug. If I find out they are sitting in a classroom anywhere in this county by Monday morning, I'm coming back, and I won't be in a talking mood. Wallace nodded frantically, his face glistening with sweat. Yes, sir. Absolutely. It will be handled immediately. Go. Jackson barked at the two boys. Trent and Weston didn't hesitate. They practically sprinted toward the school entrance, their heads hung in ultimate defeat, followed closely by a flustered Principal Wallace. The reign of terror at Oak Creek High had been dismantled in less than 10 minutes without a single punch being thrown. Jackson turned his back on the crowd and slowly walked back to where Coach Brian Matthews was standing with Cody. The entire courtyard was dead silent, watching the massive biker return to the bruised, limping 15-year-old. Coach Matthews, Jackson said, extending a massive, calloused hand. Brian took it, surprised by the firm, respectful grip. You did the right thing calling me, Jackson said, his dark eyes softening with genuine gratitude. You stood up for my blood when nobody else would. The club doesn't forget a favor. If this school ever gives your football program a hard time, you have my number. Brian gave a tight, relieved smile. Just take care of him, Jackson. He's a good kid. He deserves better than what he's been getting. Jackson turned to Cody. The anger had completely vanished from his face, replaced by a profound, agonizing guilt. He reached out and gently squeezed Cody's unbruised shoulder. Why didn't you tell me, kid? Jackson asked softly. I told you. You always call me if you're in trouble. I didn't want to mess things up for you, Cody whispered, wiping a tear from his dirt-smudged cheek. You've been working so hard to go legit. The auto shop, the parole officer. I knew if I told you they were hurting me, you'd come down here and do something that would send you back to prison. I couldn't lose you again, Jax. Jackson's jaw tightened, deeply moved by his little brother's sacrifice. He pulled Cody into a tight embrace, being careful of his bruised ribs. For the first time in his life, Cody let out a sob of pure relief, burying his face in the heavy leather of his brother's cut. You're never going to lose me, Jackson murmured into Cody's hair. I got the auto shop open last week. The paperwork cleared. I signed a lease on a 3-bedroom house out in the valley. Cody pulled back, his eyes wide. What? Go to your locker and get your stuff, Cody, Jackson said, a real smile finally breaking through his scarred features. You're not going back to Brenda's foster house. I already had my lawyer file the emergency custody papers this morning. I'm taking you home. You're living with me now. Cody looked from Jackson to Coach Brian, a radiant, disbelieving joy washing over his battered face. He didn't say a word. He just turned and limped toward the school doors as fast as his bruised leg could carry him, eager to pack up his miserable past and leave it behind forever. Jackson watched him go, then unhooked the matte black helmet from his Harley. He patted the leather passenger seat of the roaring machine, ready to give his little brother the ride of his life. If this gripping story of brotherhood and standing up to bullies sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends. True family always protects their own, no matter the cost. Subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life drama stories every single week. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were the coach? See you next time.